Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Supply. Let's make a simple knee pouch. If you ride a horse, tractor, four-wheeler, this is a great way to keep your phone close and convenient. And it's not a terribly difficult project, though it doesn't look that way. All right, so anything I use in this video, weaverleathersupply.com, or check below. We've got links there, going to take you straight to the website. Also, if you want to know when our videos release, just click your notifications. You'll know exactly when these come out. So let's step over to our pattern table. Look at our pattern. We've got a simple pattern for a simple project. We're going to look at our digital pics, but let's look at what we're doing first. That's going to help everything fall right into place. Now this size is going to be comfortable for most phones. We're going to create a pocket 4 inches wide, 6 inches tall by 3/4 of an inch deep. So right here, there's our first panel. That's the front of our pocket, 4 by 6. There's our 3/4 inch bottom bend. There's our back panel, 4 by 6. Top bend, 3/4 of an inch. And there we go. That's all we're doing. Now on the back here, we've got 2 oblong holes. That's where we're going to slide our leg strap through. So on our leg strap, we can certainly make this easier, but we're going to do this right, just like a belt. So we're going to use Sam Browns or button studs, and we're going to use 2 of those. We're going to come in 1/2 inch, and then we're going to give those a 3/4 inch spread. Down on this end, we're going to punch our holes with a 3/4 inch spread. Now, this can get a little complicated, but again, we're doing this right. So these 2 lines, when I measure my leg above my calf, that's exactly 12 inches. So let's do this. Let's punch our holes and let's straddle that 12-inch mark. So we can come in a little bit, we can go out a little bit more, but that's going to hit exactly 12 inches. On our gusset, well, we're going to go 3/4 wide by 6 inches tall. But let's do this. Let's add 1/4 inch on 3 sides. That will be our tab to sew that to our main body. Okay, over to our digital pics. On our main body, 17.5 inches long, 4 inches wide. We've got the measurements there for our oblong. We're going to come down 1 inch from the inside of our back bend or our top bend. On our leg strap, we're going to go with a 3/4 inch spread. We've got a 1 inch on one end, and then on the other, we've got a 3/4 inch spread for our Sam Browns, 1/2 inch to the end. And on our gusset, we're going 1 1/4 inches wide by 6 inches overall tall. So what we'll do here is we've got 5 3/4. We're going to add 1/4 inch to either side, then 1/4 inch to the bottom to create a tab. That's where we'll stitch. So easy enough on this. Now, on our tuck catch, that's our closure. Love them. They can go so many places, and we see these all the time. We're going to come back for that because we'll need to mark for that before we sew. Okay, let's step over to our main table, cut some leather. Let's go with our Fire Veg Tan. This is a beautiful leather. It's a 3 to 4 ounce, but it's got a little body to it, but also a little bit softer. That's going to work nicely for our pouch. And we've got this in 3 beautiful colors. I almost want to go with the blue, but let's go with the chestnut. Now, on our pattern, I've made this out of poster board. Not the best way to go, but the first time I make a project, I'm going to use poster board. Inexpensive, easy to mark, easy to erase. But once we knock this together, we know we've got a good pattern. Let's step over to our pattern sheeting. It's easy to cut, easy to mark, but durable. So if we want to make more of these, and I hope we will, that's the way to go. So right here, I've cut a straight edge in this just to save us a little time. Now, if we're going to go with the blue or a darker leather, we could always go with one of our marking pens. That's a great way to mark darker leathers because they're hard to see. But on this, our wooden awl is going to be just right. I need as clean and tight of a line as I can get that. So let's start right here. I'm going to butt right next to the edge. Good. All right, let's scribe. Now, when we scribe this, we don't have to scribe the entire line because we're going to use a straight edge. So let's just mark a little bit. Good. And same up there. And we've got that. Now, the camera probably can't pick that up, but I can easily see that. So with a straight edge, let's cut this piece out. Now, new blade, sharp blade, every time when we're working with our lighter leathers. Good. Okay, and with our square, let's do our best to square on that line. We're going to come down to our end cut, which is right there. And let's trim that out. In fact, I could have gone just a little bit further, but easily done. Good. Okay, on this end, again, we've got our bottom line. Let's scribe, or let's square right to our edge so we always get a good clean square line, and let's trim that. Good. Back to this end, we've got our marks here, so let's cut those. And we've got our main body cut, so nothing difficult thus far. Now on our strap, we're going to go 3/4 of an inch. Now the easiest way to get a good width on this, to mark this, let's take our square, bring that over to 3/4, and let's make a cut in that. I can see that. And our length, let's come down, do the same thing down here. Good. Now let's cut between those marks, and we're going to have a very clean, very straight strap. And now let's cut this to size. Nice, and last up, our 2 gussets. We need to cut 2 of these, 1 1/4 wide, so let's do the same thing. Now on one end, let's come in and notch 1/4 of an inch. Good. Well, nothing difficult thus far. Those look clean. So let's take our main body back over to our pattern table, add the bottom portion of our tuck catch. We can typically add both sides of our closure after we assemble a project, but in this situation, we've only got 3/4 inch depth there, so it's going to be hard to get our hand down in there to bend back the tines on our closure. So we're going to add half of our closure first. Now we're going to go with a tuck catch, and I love these. We've seen these. They're inexpensive, they look good, and they're easy to add. That's all we're doing. So we've got 3 pieces here. We've got our lock, we've got our catch, and then a backing plate. We're going to add the catch first. Now this can look a little bit confusing, and here's why. So with this, there we go. We're going to add our lock down here on the flap of the pouch. So really it would make sense that that piece is going to go right there with the loop towards it. But actually, when we fold this around, there we go. Now that's up. So we're going to measure from the throat of our pocket. So right here, we're going to come in 3 inches. So let's take our square. I'm going to square to one side or the other at 3 inches. Good. Let's go right to the edge. All right. The center of this, 2 inches, 4-inch width. So let's take, notice, let's see, on the back of this, yeah, there we go. We've got 3 tines that we're going to bend in. On this single tine on the end, let's take that. I'm going to put that right on my 2-inch mark, and I'm going to press in. I'm going to center it, press that in. Now, I don't want to press it so hard that I actually bend the tines, but if we just work it a little bit, yeah, there we go. Now I can see the marks. So let's do this, just like setting a spot. I'm going to use our art knife and just a simple little pallet that's just cardboard taped together, but we're going to push through our leather into this, so we don't want to ding our blade. Now, when we get our art knife, it's going to have this smaller, more sturdy blade. What I'd like to do is order the replacements, because that's the longer, thinner blade, because we want to mimic the shape of that tine. Okay, so over here, on my cross piece, I don't want more slit than tine, so let's just go straight across. Good, and maybe about 1/3 down. We've got that. Now on these, we've got a little bit of an angle here. What we can do is lay this down. Now I can see what angle. I need my knife. Let's press that through, and the same on this side. Okay, we've got some good slits there. And again, I don't want more slit than tine. And we can certainly open these up just a little bit more. So let's slide our tines through there. And that's not a bad fit, but over here I can see I need to slit a little bit more in that direction. And there we are. That actually looks good. Let's put this on the edge of our table. Let's let the loop hang off. And now let's press that down on those tines. Okay, well that looks good. Now let's take our backing plate. Drop this on. And again, we've got that loop there. So let's spin this, let that hang off the table. Now with the end of our knife, let's be careful, sharp blade, but with this end, let's bend those tines inward. Okay, well that's easy enough, and it looks good. Now, one point, since we're going to use this for our phone, it could be a nice idea to drop in a patch, sew in a patch behind that. But for me, I am always face in, meaning when I put my phone in my pocket, I want the glass towards me just to protect it. We're going to do the same thing here. So we're not going to worry about lining that. All right, let's step back over to our main table, mark for sewing. Let's step over to our heavy duty awl. This is a great awl, makes a good mark, but this is going to give us more of a mark, where that's going to give us more of a hole. I don't want that. So let's start right here. Let's mark for our oblong holes. Spring that down right to the end. Good. And a mark at the top and a mark at the bottom. That way we can make sure we get our oblong straight. Good. Now next up, we're going to mark for a groove line. We've got this little loop here, so it makes it a little hard to measure, but let's do this. Let's go right to the edge. Now about 1/8 of an inch in, let's make a mark. This is going to make sense here in just a minute. Same thing on this side. Good. That's going to be the end of our groove line. Unless we want to sew around the flap, we absolutely can. So with our groover, I'm going to set this at 1/8 of an inch, and I'm going to leave it there for all the pieces so that when our edges come together, they're all a perfect match. Now, this leather is not going to groove great, not like a Veg Tan, but we really just need more of a guide than an actual groove. So let's just work that easily. Yeah, there we go. We can see that. Down to our end. Okay, let's do the same thing on this side, but let's make sure we stop right on our mark. There we are. Okay, that looks good. Actually, we can groove around even if we're not going to sew. Still a nice edge decoration. Our last mark here is going to be at the bottom, the very center of our bottom bend. So let's put our, again, because that's a little hard to measure that with that loop there, let's come in from the side, put a mark right there. Same on the other side. Okay, that's marked. We know where our chisel holes are going to be. Over to our gussets. Now, we don't need any marks here, but let's groove the 3 sides that we're going to sew. Easy to see, and in fact, that actually looks nice. I almost want to do that on the throat, flap, and strap, but let's leave that where it is. So over to our strap, we're going to mark here. We've got 2 holes on the end and then 6 down on this side. Our last mark, good. Let's go punch some holes in this leather. Let's start with our oblong. Now, if we don't have an oblong, we can punch 2 holes with our revolving punch and then cut between them. But the tool, it's always the best way to go. So we've got our marks right here. I know exactly where that needs to be, but I want to do my best to get that as parallel to our edge as we can. Same on this side. Okay, that looks good. Now let's step over to our diamond chisel. Love this. It's going to give us a really pretty stitch line. But let's do this just one step at a time. So with our gussets, we've got our mark, our center mark on the middle of the bottom bend. Let's take our chisel, our 4-tine. I'm going to straddle that mark, and I'm going to put the chisel right in that groove line. Good. Let's make sure though, we get the full width of the tine through the leather. That'll make it easier on us when we hand sew. So over here, same thing. Let's straddle that mark. Good. All right, next up, we're going to give this a 1-tine spread. Here's what I'm talking about. So from that last tine, we're going to skip a tine, then we're going to start our chisel out here. So let's drop that in. Good. Okay. Same on this side. And let's do our best to get that chisel right in our groove line. Same thing on this side. So we're working up our pocket. We're working up our back, the back panel. And we've got that side. Now, that distance is going to vary depending on the weight of leather we're using. But for me, typically 1 tine, if we're in the 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 ounce, is going to work. So we've got a good start over there. Let's step over to our gusset. I'm going to drop our 4 and I'm going to center that as best I can. Good. Now let's come over to the side. Let's go back to our 6. 4 is fine. We just chew up a little more distance with this. I'm going to put that first tine right against the edge of the leather on the outside. I'm going to butt that up. Good, we've got that. Okay, first tine, last hole, staying in our groove line. And let's see, perfect. 1 more 6. Good. Now let's do the same thing on the other side. And 1 more. Now, if we make sure we get that first tine, last hole and centered, we will always have the same number of holes. So now I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Good. We've got our gussets done. Now, we don't have to worry about counting holes. I can just lay that right there, and I can see exactly how many holes I'm going to need. So let's work our way up to the throat of the pocket. And 3 more, that takes us right to that top edge. And again, if we get that first tine, last hole, it's always going to be exactly the same number of holes. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side of the pouch pocket. And we've got 3 holes on that side. Okay, good. Now over here, we know exactly where to stop, but it wouldn't be a bad idea. Let's go ahead and lay our gusset in, and let's work from that just so we make sure we have the same number of holes. We have got that ready to hand sew. We can absolutely sew this on a machine, but if we don't have a machine, we can still hand sew leather, absolutely, and it's going to be a beautiful stitch. So let's reset here, work on our strap. Let's start here. Let's go with a round end punch. Now we don't have to use this tool, but it's a nice touch on straps that don't go through a buckle. We could always clip our corners if we want to, but on this, let's round in both ends. We've got that. Okay, that's a nice touch. Good. Now let's add our Sam Browns or button studs. In fact, we've probably seen these. It's an old school closure. We've probably seen these on older military holsters or pouches or bags. So with this, we've got a screw back. It's a relatively small screw. So with our revolving punch, it's one of the best out there for cost and quality. In That's a solid tool, and we've got replaceable tubes. So for our screw, let's come up to about the second tube, and on this end, we've got our 2 holes. Okay, we've got that. Now let's take our screw. What I'd like to do is add, there we go, add a little dab of white glue, because anything with a screw back can work its way out. So let's take one of our Sam Browns, and I'm just going to put a little glue in the throat of that, and let's screw this down. These have a flathead screw notch on the back, but to me, I seem to be able to get that pretty tight without a screwdriver. So we've got that in. Now on the other end, we need to do these holes a little bit differently. So on our Sam Brown, we've got our throat right there. What I'd like to do is roughly match the throat with our tube. So I'm going to come up to about the 5th hole. That's a little bit larger, but that's good. So here's what we'll do on our strap, but here's an example. So I'm going to punch a hole. We've got that. Now we're going to slit. We're going to put a slit into this. There we go. We're going to put a slit away from our stress. And I'll explain that, but let's go right here. So with that, that little slit allows that to snap down onto that post. So that's what we'll do with each of these holes. So let's start right here. I'm going to stick with about the 5th tube on my revolving punch. Let's punch our holes. We've got our last hole in. Okay, now when I said we want our slit away from the stress, here's what I'm talking about. So this is going to circle our leg. When we put this on, the stress is pulling this way. Right there on the bottom side of the hole, that's where our stress is. So we want our slit away from that. Long story short, there we go. We want our slit towards the inside of the strap. And I want that slit about 3/8 of an inch long. So let's see if I can make sure we can see this. So I'm going to come out about 3/8 of an inch, and let's go through to our pallet and cut that. But I want to stop short. I don't want to cut into this side. Again, that's where our stress is. And one more. Good, we are all the way through that. Okay, our strap is done. Let's go knock in a stitch line. This is a relatively simple project, so for those of us that want to use this project to jump into leathercraft, great way to go. But secondly, for those of us that are new, right here, this is our trusty sewing pony, worth its weight in gold. Technically, this is made to sit on. That's going to keep our work right in front of us. But I like to sew standing up. I've got better reach, more upper body strength, and better vision. Now, the great point here, I clamp this onto my table with a large C-clamp. We can clamp this in all kinds of configurations. The point there, let's be comfortable when we're hand sewing. Now, 2 tips on this. Well, first off right here, I'd like to take some scrap, contact cement that to the jaws. That's got some sharp edges or hard edges on it. I don't want to ding my project. But right here, the best tip I can offer, a small piece of tape over that lever. Because as we're sewing, our thread will notoriously grab that, release our project, falls out, bounces around. Very frustrating. So let's add a little piece of tape right there. So on our needles and our thread, we're going to go with the John James number 18 hand sewing needle. It's a great needle. Well, hand sewing, no sharp point. That's a big help to us, but it's my favorite sewing needle. And on our thread, we're going to go with the Ritza. We're going to go with the smallest. This is the 0.6 millimeter. It's going to look good on our pouch. All right, so let's start sewing. Let's start by taking our main body. We're going to drop this in our pony. And right here, those are the 4 holes. That's the bottom of our gusset, and we've got our gusset. So let's take a needle. I'm going to push this through the last hole in my gusset and the last hole away from me on our main body. Good, that's just going to hold that there while we get a couple of stitches in. Now we're going to do a basic saddler stitch. Super easy stitch, very strong, looks good. And I'll explain more about that in just a minute. But the point here, so we're going to need about 4 times our length in thread. Well, that's actually about 2 1/4 inches. Well, it's inexpensive. So let's give ourselves ample thread to work with. Let's start right here. I've got a needle on both ends. Let's come through from our first hole, from our face, and the first hole on our gusset. And let's bring that through. Even out our thread distance. Good. Now the second hole, I'm going to start from my face. I'm going to come through both pieces. Let's pull that through, and I'm going to pull that back and up. Okay, so that's opened that hole up. So now with this needle, I'm going to go through exactly the same hole. So let's pull that through. Good. Now I'm going to do the same thing 2 more times. Good, there we go. Now once we get 1 stitch, maybe 2 in there, we can take that extra needle out. And through the last hole, the same thing. Pull through and up, and that needle goes right through it. All right, let's give that some good tension, but I don't want to give that so much tension that it ripples. Now our next step, let's come through from our front. Let's go back to the second hole, the last hole we were on, and let's push our needle just through the front ply. Yeah, there we go. Now, let's take that needle off. I'm going to do the same thing back here. Second hole back, and I'm just coming through the back ply. There we are. Now, let's add some tension to that. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to tie a simple square knot. Right over left, circle around, draw down, and then left over right, circle around and draw down. Good. Now, there's 2 ways we can go here. This is a great pair of scissors. Actually, this is my go-to pair. I've got 8 or 10 sets. These work nicely because we can clip thread all the way down to the very end. But also, let's do this. We've got our knife right here. We never use this part of the blade. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to cut into my thread. I'm going to pull my thread over my blade so we don't cut into our project. Good. Now I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the other side. We've got that. Okay, next step, let's start sewing our pocket. So let's move our body. There we go. Let's get that bend outside of our pony because now we're going to bring this around and sew our edge. I've got just a cheap clamp from a hobby store. I don't want a real strong clamp because I don't want something that's going to ding my leather. Right there, we've got our cutout. Let's press that together and bring our edge. There we go. We're going to clip this. But we don't need to clip for long because very shortly, once we get a couple of stitches in, our thread's going to tell us where our edge is going to land and not our clip. So, all right, let's go with 4 times our length. And typically with me, I go ample more just so I don't have issues. Let's start right here. Let's make sure we find the lowest hole on our main body. We're going to come through that. And then on our gusset, the lowest hole there, sometimes it can be a little hard to find. But once we get that first hole in, everything else is going to fall into place. Good, we've got that. Okay, let's bring that through. Again, equalize out the distance on our thread. Now, I didn't really get to explain this on about 3 stitches or 4 stitches in our gusset. But what we're doing, if we've got a flat chisel, we're going to sew with both needles at one time. It's going to look fine. But if we do that with a diamond chisel, we're going to get an inconsistent stitch line. So what I want to do, let's always come through our outside. Then I'm going to come through that second hole, if I can find it. We can always take that, open it up. There we go. Now we can figure out where that hole is. Let's come through from the front. And I'm going to come back and up. We're opening up that hole. Now let's come right through with that back needle, and it slides right through. Good. Let's give some good tension to that. Let's do that again. From the face first, next hole, through our gusset, and now it starts to get a little bit easier. Good. Now, as we sew this, that's going to work together. Now, let's take our clip off, and all we're going to do now is just sew all the way down to the end. And we're down to our last hole. We can always use a clip to keep this flap from moving around on us. makes it a little easier. But another good point. Notice how my needles literally slide right through both holes. That's because we got the full width of the tine through that hole when we were chiseling. Okay, let's add some tension there. Now, just like we did on our gusset, from this side, I'm going to come back one hole and just go through the back ply. Same on the front, back to the second hole, only through the front ply. And there we are. Now let's tie our square knot and clip that off. Good, I'm going to do exactly the same thing to the other three sides. We've got it, and that looks good. Nice meat on our edges. We've got a pretty stitch line. So all told, hand sewing, not difficult, not time consuming. In fact, it took less than 10 minutes on each side. We don't need a sewing machine to make a beautiful project. All right, we're almost done, but let's add one nice detail. We're using black hardware. We've got a pretty black stitch line in this. Let's go with a black edge paint. It's really going to be a nice detail. But before we do that, so here's our lock. Now we're going to go with the black, but the silver is a little easier to see on the black background here. That's going to go, there we are, right on the end of that point. So what we need to do, let's clip both sides, just a small piece. There we are. Now let's just check that. Yeah, there we go. That looks good. Okay, so over to our edge die. Now on this, we need to be a little careful because it can wrap around. But let's get a little bit in the applicator. And now let's just work our way along our edges. Good. When we get one done, let's come back with our rag and let's wipe that edge off. Again, I don't want too much of that dye wrapping around, but if we get to it pretty quick, it'll rub right off. Okay, so I'm going to go all the way around all edges. There we go. We have got a good looking pouch. Very nice. Let's go add some hardware. We're done. Now this step, bit of a detail, small nuance, but we're going to hammer down our stitch line. Now I say hammer, really what I mean is tap, because we're not going to hit the leather hard enough to ding it, but what we'll do is when we tap this down, it's going to close down the chisel holes and it's going to spread out that stitch. Now no one's going to see that but us, but still. Now we can go with a mallet, absolutely, but notice right here, that's where I hit all of my setters. So I'd like to go with this edge if we're using a mallet. But let's go with a tack hammer. This is a great tool to have in our shop specifically for this purpose. So let's put this on the edge of our marble and let's just tap. Now, like I said, not hard enough to ding the leather. Yeah, but there we go. That looks good. I'm going to do the same thing to the other three sides. We've got that done. Looking good thus far. Now, on our flap, I have not marked for our rivet hole, because if we need to, we can trim this a little bit. Right here, we've got ample room there. I tend to go a little bit longer for a pouch, because once we start filling this with stuff, yeah, it's going to get thick quick. So let's do this. Let's take our lock, slide that on, and let's get that right to the bottom edge of that leather. There we go. Now, let's mark that. Good. Okay, on our revolving punch, we're going to go with a small double cap. Love the double cap. It's almost the only rivet I use. But right there, we've got that in multiple finishes. Black, that's beautiful. So we're going to go, I always call this the small. It's the 1/4 inch. So let's come up to about the second tube. Let's punch our hole. Good. Now let's put our lock on and let's come up through the bottom with our rivet. Cap. Now, we've got a great 4-piece setter set. It's got a setter for just about everything. But I like to go with this smaller setter for the smaller rivets. This just comes in our small rivet pack. So let's hold that there. Good. Now, I don't want to hit that so hard that I crush this little piece in, which is easy to do. Right there. That looks good. And there we are. Good looking pouch. Let's step back over to our main table at our strap. Our strap, all but done. Now, I'm right-handed, so I'm going to put this on my right knee. So the way I want to do this, I want to bring our strap in from the back oblong and then through the front, so that when that wraps around and we clip that down, the point is sticking backwards. So let's take that through. Good, we've got that. Now, 12 inches. Let's see how that lands. Just right. Very cool. Low profile closure there. That's not going to be a problem. How about fit? There we are. We have done a nice job on this one. So many ways to go here though. That'd make a great belt pouch. Add a belt loop or a belt clip. But all told, very happy with the way that came out. Now one thing. I notice I've got an extra hole over here. So the reason I've done that is an example of not paying attention. Yeah, that's got to be it. But all told, that's a good looking pouch. Easy on, easy off, comfortable, looks good, and very convenient. Great place to keep your phone. I hope you have a great time with your knee pouch, and I hope it comes out beautifully. Good luck with your projects.